e-commerce policy, pharma pricing, all such things that India was taken out of the generalized system of preferences list. But this time around, you find that for the first time, you find that trade and security are getting linked.
Secondly, at the level of state, it's the norm of sovereignty which has always been a reference point in international relations. So what he is doing is, so to say, to justify what he deems to be US interests.
And this is not the first time that there has been a trade concern between India and the US. In 2019 also, when during Trump's administration 1.0, the first time that he was elected the president, he called India the Tariff King and took India out of the GSP, Generalized System of Preferences list.
We would not say that China is an enemy, so we would not talk to them. We would talk to China also because US is talking to Russia. And we are also signaling that we are not going to leave a traditional partner like Russia only because US now is putting pressure on us. So, public diplomacy in terms of engaging with the public opinion of the US without getting entangled into domestic politics, but understanding that it's US also is a democracy, and midterm elections, congressional elections are going to way signal how powerful President Trump remains. So engaging with US public opinion.
Hello and welcome to the Perspective by Vision IAS, where we talk about important happenings around the world and India. Today we will talk about the tariffs that have been levied on India by US, which are approximately about 50% on most of our products. So what are these tariffs? What are the consequences of those tariffs? Why they have been imposed? We will talk all this with our esteemed faculty members, Anjani sir and Aishi ma'am. Welcome sir, welcome ma'am.
Thank you, Kapil.
Ma'am, before we start, why are we talking about these tariffs now?
Yes, these tariffs that we find, first and foremost, you find that almost 50% hike in tariffs. Yes, and this is not the first time that there has been a trade concern between India and the US. In 2019 also, when during Trump's administration 1.0, the first time that he was elected the president, he called India the Tariff King and took India out of the GSP, Generalized System of Preferences list. So that time also we were concerned, but that time around the concerns were different. It was primarily in context of market access in terms of e-commerce policy, pharma pricing, all such things that India was taken out of the generalized system of preferences list. But this time around, you find that for the first time, you find that trade and security are getting linked, because these 50% tariffs that we are talking about have come about in two parts. First, there was the 25% reciprocal tariff, and there is an additional 25% penalty tariff. Penalty because India is trading in terms of oil purchase, in terms of defense imports from Russia. And this has been raised as a matter of concern by the Trump administration, and they have imposed a tariff on us. But once again, what we need to pay attention is, as we know, Trump's administration decision and Trump's decisions are quite volatile. So this time also we do not find continuity in his policy stand. So this time also, though he has imposed penalty tariffs on India for engaging in economic ties with Russia, despite the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, you find that it is not just India which is buying oil from Russia. Yes, China is one of the foremost importers. Even EU, despite they have substantially reduced the natural gas that was coming via the pipelines. But still then, some natural gas and LNG is being bought by Europe. Certain European countries like Hungary, Slovakia are in fact continuing to import crude oil from Russia. Even US itself is purchasing fertilizers and other goods Yes, enriched uranium. Europe is also purchasing enriched uranium. Important minerals such as nickel, such as iron from US. From Russia. Yes, so it is in this context there is this concern that what is the real reason for these tariffs getting imposed? And of course, cumulatively, 50% tariffs puts our export industry at a comparative disadvantage, rather at a severe disadvantage.
Sir, like as ma'am has pointed out, what is the reason behind it? Like, are they reciprocal in nature, or there is geopolitics involved? As Peter Navarro, the advisor to the US president, was saying that he has accused India of having the Maharaja tariffs. So, is it just about tariff, or there is a lot of geopolitics involved?
So, Kapil, to understand something like this, we have to make a lot of conjectures, first of all. But what would be helpful is to look at it from what we can understand as levels of analysis. At the level of individual, President Donald Trump has made a decisive political comeback. He has made certain promises to his domestic audience. So part of what he is doing is part of his own politics. Politics of personality, politics of his own domestic audience, that is something that has to be understood. Secondly, at the level of state, it's the norm of sovereignty which has always been a reference point in international relations. So what he is doing is, so to say, to justify what he deems to be US interests. And when the Trump administration is doing so, it is doing so without any regard to the interest of others. And that's problematic. As far as the way we were able to construct forms of cooperation at the international level, bilateral level, it's detrimental to that. And thirdly, it's at the level of system. So that is where we can understand that it's part of, as Raghuram Rajan has in simple terms said, that it is not about economics, it's about power politics. So Professor Raghuram Rajan is an economist, and he has pointed out correctly that it's not about simple economics, it's about power politics. So from the perspective of international relations, we should look at it as a great power politics, great power game being involved here. It's about US signaling its own importance to its competitors, adversaries, or peer competitors. It's about its signaling on the one hand to Russia, it's signaling on the other hand to China. And thereby, we should not take it personally. It's not necessarily particularly against India. It's a combination of these three factors, as I mentioned. And when we understand it in that way, we can find broader solutions or way of dealing with it also. Now, the specific thing that we can bring out is, we should go back to the last term of, previous term of President Trump. He had escalated tariffs, particularly against China, particularly against certain products like aluminum and steel. So again, it was a signaling to domestic audience. He had used the defense of national security, which is not very well defined in terms of international regulations, WTO rules, etc. But it was not hidden from anyone that ultimately it is the US under a particular president which is trying to reset the rules of negotiation vis-a-vis its most important competitors, but also vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So this is something that I would like to point out as we try to understand this.
And so, like, we are seeing that India has been hit by the highest number of tariffs, whether it's China, or as ma'am was pointing out, like China is also importing a lot of Russian oil, and Indonesia recently had a deal. So when we see among those, like as you mentioned, it's not specifically against India, but India has been given the maximum tariff, we can say. So why this singling out of India?
Right. So as I said, that the way, once you start looking at what US is doing currently, we should not take it personally. But when we are looking at India's specific issues like 50% tariff bracket, 25% reciprocal tariff, 25% because of Russian oil purchases, So again, to explain this, there are lots of theories which are going around. But I would like to point out to one fact that if US is playing by the rule of national interests and sovereignty or sovereign prerogative, India is a country of a size which cannot be easily subdued. This has been our history, that we won't like to be subdued into doing something. And the public nature of this accusation or the statements which are coming out, Mr. Navarro, if he is writing as a way of saying what the administration can't say. The administration itself is saying a lot of things explicitly given the personality of President Trump. But this public posturing signaling is something that vitiates the understanding of it. But the simple understanding of it is this, that India has always been considered a tough negotiator. That is because we have our own interest to take care of, because we have a very large demography. And India is not a small country which can easily be subdued. So if there is a negotiation going on, it's bound to happen that two sides won't see each other eye to eye on many issues. So negotiations then move on to understanding of core issues, core demands, and then the possibilities of where the compromise can be struck. But the absolute nature of US stand on, let's say, making blanket statement, India is tariff king, without understanding how these tariff regimes have evolved in international trade, is either displaying an ignorance of what has happened in the past, and this is basically what Mr. Trump also does. He says that my predecessors knew nothing, right? So he has forgotten how we have reached to this place where, for example, the GSP, Generalized System of Preference, emerged out of the UNCTAD talks, which emerged out of the need of developing countries for focus on their own issues. They had different development priorities. So the world is not uniform. Rules should be applicable for everyone, but rules should be arrived at first by understanding what is the minimum that everyone can agree on. Similarly, at WTO, you have special and differential treatment, right? These provisions have been negotiated, inserted in international trade rules. And the US at one point in time was the primary moving force behind these negotiations, GATT negotiations, WTO negotiations. So what the Trump administration seems to be doing is, it is hell-bent on destroying the pre-existing order so that a new order can emerge in which they can assert themselves again. They can shape the rules to suit their own requirements. But they forget that if sovereignty is the norm and power is the currency, then a country like India has to be respected for its intrinsic capabilities and the potential that it has. And it also has to be remembered that a country like India just cannot give in on certain demands, for example, slashing tariffs on agricultural products. Given our domestic economy, agricultural sector has a larger share, right? So this is insensitivity, and we have seen this happening in India-US relations for a very long time. So we should not understand India-US relations only through this episode, but we should understand it through a broader scheme of things. And we should also look at the particulars which are going on right now. And in this case, the particular is the personality of President Trump, the way he has read his own mandate, and he is convinced of his invincibility, right? But ultimately, individuals are not infallible. Individuals are not permanent, right? So relations would go on. This episode would teach us a lot of lessons.
Ma'am, now talking about the impact of these tariffs. So which sectors will be impacted by it? We are already seeing impacts on MSMEs in Tamil Nadu, UP. So which is the area which will be impacted more?
Yes, Kapil, before I come to your question, if I might just add to what Sir was saying. Yes, as Sir was saying, we should not think it in terms of it just being about India. It is also believed to be a strategic maneuver of putting pressure on Russia itself to maybe accept that yes, it needs to put a full stop, put an end to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Also, there are many things that are going on while US itself is trying to improve relations or enter into a sort of a detente with Russia and China. Yes, the situation, yes, overall, right now it is unraveling and we need to see how it unravels. But of course, one concern of whatever has been happening, India has been one of the foremost strategic ally of US. Yes, from the nadir that this relation had hit in 1998 when India had undertaken the nuclear testing. Yes, since then, since 2000 onwards, you find that there has been a lot of investment by both the countries to improve the bilateral ties, so much so that for past 25 years, I think so, they have been this one line that has been repeated every time we talk about India-US relation, that it is the defining partnership of the 21st century. Yes, even weeks, even a couple of days before this unraveling of the tariffs, yes, which Mr. Trump had called the Liberation Day. Yes, so there was statements coming out of US administration about the importance that India carries. Even as these unraveling is happening, you find the defense ties. We are focusing on defense ties and 10-year, once again, so we have signed that framework. Yes, to bolster the defense relations once again. Yes, so a lot is happening, but one way to look at it, maybe it is also signaling to India that there is this concerns expressed by the scholars that maybe assertion of strategic autonomy. US has never been comfortable when it comes to countries asserting equality with US. When I say equality, we are not saying equality in terms of sheer economic or political power. Equality in terms of demanding a status of friendship or equal partners as sovereign nations. They want either countries to be allies or to be or they are the adversaries. So allies means junior partners. Either you have to be a junior partner or you are the adversary of US. So India put forth this unique stand of demanding equal partnership, being a sovereign nation. So maybe India's assertion of strategic autonomy, where it would want to engage with both Russia and China through maybe BRICS and SCO, while engaging with US in the Indo-Pacific realm. So that might be one of the reasons why you find such a stand against India. But as Sir was pointing out, the volatile personality of Trump and the Trump administration one needs to be mindful of it, and the relations will continue. It is a relation that we have invested in. Let's see how things move about. Now, as far as your question about the impact of these tariffs on the sectors, on particular sectors, so it is the MSME sector which is going to be hit. Yes, you find that particularly you have the labor-intensive sectors such as the textile, the gem and jewelry, leather, footwear industry. Yes, these are the sectors which are going to be impacted, and the problem is that these sectors, they are MSME sectors, they drive on wafer thin margins. Yes, so once they face this imposition of 50% tariff, the competitiveness is going to substantially decline. In fact, there is a lot of concern about order cancellation, about maybe layoffs, liquidity crunch in this sector that might develop.
Sir, if like these tariffs go through, then obviously India will losing the market share in the US. So who is bound to gain from this loss, and will the US hold on to this? Do you see them like moving away from these tariffs going forward? So who will gain from this, and does US hold on?
So the answer to the second question would be difficult. It's like gazing into the crystal ball and looking at the future and telling what would happen. In terms of who may gain, it's fairly clear in terms of the countries which are already integrated into supply chains, or they have a particular place in value chain in particular areas of manufacturing, and who have also received relatively favorable tariff treatment from the current Trump administration, right? So textile, apparels, countries like Bangladesh, electronics manufacturing and other areas, countries like Vietnam, engineering goods manufacturing countries from ASEAN, etc., stand to gain definitely because of, as I mentioned, two factors: supply chain integration, their place in value chain, and the kind of treatment that they have received from the Trump administration. Whether the US would continue on this path or not, well, again, if we analyze it from the perspective of personalities, the treatment of China by President Trump can be a precedent where it seems that Mr. Trump may have taken 2 steps back while he has taken 1 step ahead. So this may happen in the case of, let's say, India also. But there is a big if involved there, right? The second thing is, which from the perspective of India, we should remember, is there has been this tendency in India-US relations where the US has been a partner, but US also has been insensitive and putting pressure on India or not understanding India's own unique requirements on many occasions. So one example that I'll give you is, which is the starting point of the current stage of our relationship. 1998 nuclear test. US led the sanctions, Western sanctions on India. What ensued was a dialogue between Strobe Talbot, Deputy Secretary of State then of the US, and Mr. Jaswant Singh, then the Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission. Now, these dialogues are a part of what we say in define in terms of defining India-US relationship as relationship between two democracies, that we share values. When we share values, maybe talking on certain things becomes easier. There is a scope for it. So Jaswant Singh Strobe Talbot talks of 1998 resulted in the visit of President Clinton to India, and subsequently President Bush, who followed President Clinton, was instrumental in not only lifting these reciprocal sanctions, but also building a stronger strategic foundation of the relationship. So this is one thing that we can learn from the past, that maybe we need to look at what are the possibilities of engaging with the US on this matter. Certainly, we are not being reactive, which is a very good thing. We are not doing it in terms of statements, tit-for-tat. We are not vitiating the atmosphere. So when calm prevails, when the current US administration comes to a certain understanding that it needs to engage ultimately with partners like India, we should be prepared for that opportunity.
Ma'am, like continuing what sir has said, that we have not gone for tit for tat, but there is a chorus for reciprocal tariffs. So why we have not done that, and how do you assess India's response till now?
See, Kapil, our response has been firm. But we are not going for tit-for-tat strategy. Rather, we are adopting less noise, more strategy approach, whereby we stand firm on our ground. As sir had previously mentioned about India being tough negotiator, India having own specific concerns vis-a-vis the agricultural sector. Plus, India does have the negotiating leverage of offering a large market as well. Fine, so on those grounds, we stand firm on our stand. But yes, we are not engaging in reciprocal statements, reciprocal gesturing. Rather, we have kept the doors for negotiation open. We would like to see a negotiated solution out of this vitiated atmosphere. Because why India is doing so? Because India is of course concerned. US is a much larger economy. India, of course, a growing economy, emerging economy. Yes, all that, but still US is a large economy. And if we retaliate through reciprocal tariffs or retaliatory tariffs, there might ensue a trade war, which might not be in India's interest. Plus, certain imports which are critical for India's domestic manufacturing industry might increase in cost, further deteriorating our competitive advantage. Plus, India is also about, we are concerned about professionals. H-1B visas is a matter of concern. Pharmaceutical, because India is the generic drug manufacturing industry exports 43% of what US imports of generic medicines. So India is the primary exporter of generic medicines, and we would not want that maybe US starts denying FDA approval for the generic drugs. Yes, so India also has its own concerns, so we are being mindful in pursuit of an enlightened national interest. India is not engaging, and as a responsible nation, not engaging in tit-for-tat action, rather holding our stand firm while allowing scope for negotiated solutions.
So, how would you assess the India's response till now?
So again, Kapil, I would like to see India's response in continuation with the institutional practices that have evolved. When it comes to our vital core interests, I would say in these kinds of negotiations, all governments behave in the same way. We cannot compromise on our vital interests because again, there is a logic to that also. We are a democracy, electoral democracy. If any government is seen to be compromising on issues of national interest, well, they may lose the mandate, right? But apart from that, there is this institutional practice that develops. Ultimately, these things are done by professionals. So it's very clear, as some of the reports are suggesting, that we walked away from the negotiations. And I am assuming that we did so when we realized that there is no further scope left for compromise or for an agreement to be arrived at. Second, I would say we should remember what India did the last time round when President Donald Trump, again, with his tariffs and GSP decision and reclassification of India out of a list of developing countries, had created some difficulties for India. So it was two-pronged. One, India had prepared a list of items which we import from US for retaliatory tariff if the situation reaches to that. But that was the last step that we were prepared to do. But we signaled that. Second, President Donald Trump visited India in February 2020. And at that moment, it was announced that we would engage in trade talks. And we engaged in trade talks. There are lots of forums in India-US engagements where such issues can be discussed. We have a commercial dialogue. Now 2+2 dialogue also. So again, India's response is diplomacy first, identifying our core interests and very clearly signaling that there cannot be a compromise on this. And thirdly, playing that the game which right now is going on. If it is about great power politics, then we would also hedge our bets. We would not say that China is an enemy, so we would not talk to them. We would talk to China also because US is talking to Russia. And we are also signaling that we are not going to leave a traditional partner like Russia only because US now is putting pressure on us, right? And then we have our economic options where we see a movement being made on India-UK trade agreement. We may see now India-European Union trade agreement negotiations getting a priority with the understanding of what we need and where we want to reach. Japan as a partner, an understanding of around $68 billion of investments. Now, these are all signals of how India is preparing for the fallout. And apart from that, there is also a domestic element to it. We have an understanding that there may be some pain. So how do we ease that pain? Right? So as far as we see, for example, the RBI rate cuts or the Prime Minister talking about GST reforms are a way of boosting domestic consumption, but also creating space for domestic capital investments, right? So this is where we can see that again, rather than putting all our eggs in the basket of one response, we are looking at how this scenario plays out, and we are responding to each element of it with a relevant option, as I can see currently.
So if like, ma'am, we say that there are definitely some lessons for India in this whole saga, do you see some lessons and what they are? Like what should be the broader outlook for India going forward with USA, and also the new order we can say coming up?
Yes, Kapil, when it comes to what has happened, what has transpired, and what is happening, as is the government trying with respect to, say, engaging with multiple players. Yes, so we should not be reliant on one nation for our exports. Yes, we need to further diversify our exports to multiple nations. It is in this context we see also launch of something known as Mission 40. Yes, so you find that government of India is, because as far as the textile market is concerned, it is considered to be a very, very huge market encompassing 90 countries which are enthusiastic importers of textile. Yes, and we have not been able to make a dent in that arena. We have been focused on fewer countries, one prominent being the US. So it is in this context we would try to reach out to more countries so as to make our exports more resilient. So that is one approach that the government can go by. And as I was saying, so one is export diversification. Yes, and also making good of, say, the FTAs that we have signed in the near term. We have signed one with UK, the CETA. We have signed with UAE few years back. Yes, we have signed with Australia. We are in negotiating terms with EU. So we would want to maybe hasten that process and come up to a deal with EU. So we would want to diversify our export market, while at the same time understanding the pain that it is causing to the domestic producers in the present times. We would also like to take certain domestic measures, as the government has been signaling through GST reforms. Yes, there have been through export credit guarantee corporation schemes that government has come out with. Yes, there is also another scheme about remission of the duties and taxes that is imposed, that were imposed in the process of manufacturing of a good or service which eventually gets exported. So maybe reliefs on those grounds will create some sense of relief, at least for the more hit sectors. While certain sectors which around 40% of India's export to US would not be hit, but there also the future strategy would be showing resilience through export diversification. Yes, and how are we adjusting to the new order? Let's see how things unravel, but our strategy of strategic autonomy, of multiple engagements, through which we assert our strategic autonomy holds true. We need to continue our engagement with multiple countries so that we do not become over-reliant on one single nation. Also, I keep saying Russia is not Iran for India, though Iran was also very, very important for India. But still then, we did succumb to US pressures on Iran. We did succumb to US pressures on Venezuela, for that matter. But this time around, Russia is different. Russia is a time-tested friend. And we cannot compromise on our relations with Russia for the sake of US. So, of course, a broader engagement, as India has been doing. Recently, the SEO summit was held. BRICS summits have been held. The Quad summit is upcoming, hopefully. Yes, so that would be our way of going forward, I guess.
So, what way forward do you look for India now?
So again, the way forward for India, is to start with diplomacy. We as a country have affirmed our faith in diplomacy in all circumstances, be it matters of war or be it matters of economy, etc. And diplomacy, particularly with the partner in question, which is US, and diplomacy at multiple levels, right? So there were reports about the government engaging a public relations firm in the US because that is how things are done in the US. Lobbying is legal. Second is looking at the fact that around more than 4.5 million people of Indian origin call US their home. So public diplomacy in terms of engaging with the public opinion of the US without getting entangled into domestic politics, but understanding that US also is a democracy, and midterm elections, congressional elections are going to, in a way, signal how powerful President Trump remains. So engaging with US public opinion. Third is we have developed, for example, India-US CEOs forum. So business to business engagement is something that is again should be a focus, and it is a focus. So using all these elements of leverage in diplomacy with the US itself, we should not give up on US as a partner, right? We are wiser than that. Second is, in terms of diplomacy, the common questions of humanity, the common questions of a large number of countries. Not every country has the capability to absorb price shocks which come with the, sometimes, unfortunately, the irresponsible behavior of great powers. So focusing on Africa, focusing on Latin America, focusing on larger groupings of countries, be it voices of Global South, be it non-aligned movement, be it G77, there we have to build a consensus as a bulwark against the destruction of the good elements of the current order and also the shaping of the future order. This is something that we have to do. Domestically, of course, we have to safeguard those sectors which are labor intensive and export dependent, which are going to be most likely affected. As ma'am has mentioned, particularly in areas like gems, jewelry, leather goods, agriculture, aquaculture, fisheries, we have to focus on safeguarding our MSMEs. That is very important. And apart from that, as again has been mentioned, that the multi-alignment as a way of safeguarding the space for independent decision making has not become outdated. It is still the relevant way to go about, no matter pulls and pressures of taking one side on various questions. Our strength lies in the way we have been able to develop this particular idea. That may not look very impressive at times, but this is the best bet that we have. Right? So engaging with all important partners, Russia, China, of course, with caution and clear understanding of our own national interest, but also, to the extent possible, US at platforms like IPEF or Quad Summit, right? So we should very clearly identify where our markets are, who our partners are, which are our primary adversaries, and continue working on a multi-pronged strategy. Right? It may sound cliche, but not all cliches are bad.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a detailed discussion.
Thank you.
So, aspirants, I hope now you have a good understanding about these tariffs, their impacts, and in the end, I would just say that yes, this is a difficult situation for India, but if there is one country who has experience in handling such situation, it is India itself. So we will come out of it and we will come strong. And to know more about such topics, please do remain connected with the Perspective by Vision IAS. Thank you.